This week's module is Module 7, giving an overview of residence life, commuter life, and student conduct. Many of you got your start in student affairs through residence life, whether you realized it or not. Many students live in residence halls on college campuses. Many students who eventually go into student affairs have been resident assistants or resident directors at colleges, and the residential aspect of a learning experience is hugely important, and one that can be one of the most defining and edifying experiences of a college student's life. Residence life from the very beginning of education has been a part of higher education. Students lived in dormitories with faculty at Harvard and at other schools in the colonial times of our nation. It's continued on to where now, if individuals from that time looked at the residence halls that are available now, they would be in absolute awe. Universities continue to build new residence halls with the greatest bells and whistles on them to attract students to live in them, because of course residence halls are to an extent an auxiliary service that brings in money to the universities in some ways that support the university as a whole. However, one thing that residence life individuals, student affairs individuals, and universities have to learn is residence halls are not simply about paying rent, and they're not simply about giving a student a place to live. They can be one of the greatest educational tools that universities have to educate students. There are many best practices in regards to residence life. Doing it, of course, operationally, making that aspect of the business of being a student, paying your bill, getting your housing assignment. Those things are all exceptionally important. But also socially and academically, residence halls are a jewel that oftentimes are not developed to the extent they could be to allow for student learning. You have to think about it in regards to students are living with individuals that may be different from them. They are living with individuals they have never met. There's an incredible chance for community building across statuses, socioeconomic status, across racial ethnicities, across backgrounds of all sorts, to where students not only learn about a way of life they have never learned about before, but they also learn to empathize. They hear stories, they relate, they see that even though we're different, we have so much in common. Learning communities, residence halls have the wonderful opportunity for doing that if it's done well. Also, they can be a fantastic place for academic growth in students. Living learning communities are some of the best opportunities for lessons learned inside of the classroom to be taken outside of the classroom and thought about more so than that 50 minutes or that hour and 50 minutes that a student was in the class. There are many different types of living learning communities across the nation. Some of them are academically focused, where you have students living on a hall or in a whole residence hall, and they're focused on engineering. They're all engineering majors, or they're all art majors, or they're all honors college students. And not only that, their RAs are students in those academic areas, and they have faculty advisors that are linked to those halls, or sometimes even live in those halls, who focus programming around the academic curriculum that the students are experiencing in the classroom. That can include problem-based learning, where students find a problem and they work with the faculty member to use the knowledge learned in the classroom to solve that problem. It can mean students that have the same values that live on a hall. And I've seen living learning communities focused on students who desire to live in a setting where alcohol is not imbibed. I've seen living learning communities focused on living in settings where sustainability and the environment are focused upon. And so there are different rules to how they live with each other, what they do on that floor, but also connecting with other aspects of student affairs and academic affairs to build knowledge based around ecosystems, based around the environment, and based around how we can be good stewards of the environment. Uh, and students do wonderful things while living together, focusing on these things and having student affairs administrators and faculty advisors helping them apply the lessons of the classroom to where students live. Also, residence life is the place where students are going to spend probably a majority of their time if they are residents. And so, some of the greatest movements, which you'll read about in your text, and in some of the other documents you'll read, began in residence halls when it was midnight and students were talking about life or what they had learned, and they desired to see a change on campus or a change in society. Some of the greatest spiritual formation or some of the greatest friendships and networks, people building businesses together, came from when individuals were roommates or they lived on the same hall or they lived in fraternity or sorority houses together and they had that common bond. And so please don't see residence life, and I know most of you don't, as just simply giving students a place to live. These are absolutely incredible educational opportunities for students if outside of the box thinking is done in regards to connecting student affairs with academic affairs and offering different, varied, and unique opportunities of academic, personal, and spiritual growth to students living together in residence halls. Commuter life has really taken on a large focus in the past 10 to 20 years because so many students have begun to live at home, either because of costs or because more people are moving into cities and attending larger institutions that are within larger cities, and because commuters traditionally have not shown the same amount of engagement with the university or college community as residents have. Um, to an extent, studies show, again, you'll read about quite a bit of this, that commuters often have a more difficult time connecting with the university. They often come to class, but then have to work and leave campus or live at home. And so their whole social network is outside of the campus community. That's not including what they learn in class or during their time in class, which is a smaller micro community for them, but they're not as plugged into the university opportunities and the college community. And so what many colleges have done is they have focused personnel and they have focused space and place around engaging commuters. First year experiences are huge in this, and that peer advisors make sure that they give a special focus to commuter students. Remember, resident students already have RAs who are giving them a particular focus to help them connect to the community. So first year mentors will focus on commuters, making sure they understand what opportunities for social engagement are there, what the services offered through advising and through academic support are, and how to get involved spiritually on campus if that is something the student desires to do. Some schools, including one that I worked at, have begun full commuter programs where they have commuter assistants. These are typically sophomores, juniors, or seniors who are very involved with the campus but don't live on campus. These individuals work to connect with commuters to help them understand what it looks like to get involved and to answer questions for these students as they are going through the academic and the social integration process. And then finally, space and place is always huge. We mentioned it in regards to residence life and having all the bells and whistles on the residence halls, and that should be and is the same for commuters and their needs. Having a comfortable place to study, a place that they can build community or hang out or grab a cup of coffee and a snack between classes that may be just theirs, just as a resident has their resident hall. Commuter collegiums and commuter centers have continued to be, but also are being built at a greater rate to provide those types of spaces where those commuters have those options and those services. They have that opportunity to feel comfortable and valued, and it's a common place where student affairs and faculty administrators can visit with, learn about, and kind of in a positive way target commuter students for further support, further engagement, and further relationship building. In my view, student conduct and discipline is one of the most difficult, but also one of the most important aspects of student affairs. Student conduct has changed incredibly since Harvard began in 1636, and is done, of course, in different ways at different institutions, but is also done in different ways and has different expectations of how it is done between private institutions and public institutions. Student conduct for many years was seen within the view of in loco parentis, or in the place of parents, which said that the university, in essence, once these students began studying there, took on the role of parents, and so knew the needs of students and had the right to implement what they felt was needed for the students, sometimes in an abusive sense, no matter what. And over the years, there have been court cases regarding this, and the loco parentis is now not seen as something that is viable at most, if not all, universities. However, conduct has to continue, as conduct and discipline is a core part of students' learning. It's a core part of allowing the campus to be a place of safe learning, and also it is something that allows institutions to continue to teach students what it means to live in community appropriately, and also what it means to learn from specific actions that they do that may need a type of adjusting, or may have elements of reconciliation or punishment to them, either or. There's behavioral conduct and there's academic conduct. Behavioral conduct is typically what you will do when a student has broken a rule that is contained in the university's code of conduct. That's typically found in a student handbook, and code of conducts are typically laid out very well, to an extent explicitly, but also a best practice is to make sure when you lay out a code of conduct for students that is laid out in a way that they can understand, that they understand what the rule is or the expectation is and what happens if they break it, but not to make it so incredibly defined that the institution does not have, we could say, a little bit of wiggle room in interpreting if a student broke a rule, if they didn't, or if something is not listed in the student code of conduct, that the institution still can't say what you have done is not in line with our values. There are courses, academic conduct and discipline. This goes typically with classroom learning interruptions, with how you behave towards faculty or how students behave towards faculty. but also it includes academic dishonesty, plagiarism, etc. Sometimes academic dishonesty and discipline is handled within student affairs. In many institutions, it is not, and it's handled more in the provost's office if student affairs aren't a part of the provost, or in the academic affairs area of an institution. There are different types of philosophies behind doing conduct and discipline. Your text will talk about quite a few of them. I encourage you to read that diligently and understand that there is no one silver bullet to set up conduct processes and do conduct well on university and college campuses. There's contract theory, which says that there's a relationship between the student and institution that's a contractual one, and the terms of that relationship are set forth in the institution's catalog or student handbook, or by the student simply being told what is expected of them in regards to how they act and what they do. There's the educational theory or philosophy that views the student and institutional relationship as one completely of education, and thereby this limits disciplinary control to the student, and any student that is found to be not in line with the code of conduct or academic policies. Institutions are most worried about that when it affects the institution's ability to teach or it affects the institution's educational mission. The big question comes for many individuals in conduct of whether conduct and codes of conduct and processes, judicial systems in higher education are meant to be punitive or restorative, or both. I have always taken and have always been influenced by and experienced the view that in regards to conduct and discipline, it is meant to be an educational process first and not a legal one. And two, it is meant to be one of restoration and growth for the student. If student breaks X code of conduct that is held in an institution's handbook, that student is to be given due process, which means they have a right to know for what they have or of what they have been accused to an extent as it relates to safety, who accused them of this, what was said about what they did, and then they should have a right to defend their actions to the conduct officer that's going to be adjudicating their case. But also in that process, if they are found to be responsible, there certainly can be outcomes that may seem punitive. Many schools do fines, some schools do papers, some schools do community service. However, all of those outcomes are meant to, one, get the student's attention to help them realize where they may have faltered, and two, to teach them how to further grow as a person and how to be a greater part of the learning community. In essence, there's a punitive aspect to it, but that punitive aspect is meant to educate the student and restore them into the educational and social community of the college. Now, there are instances where that restoration is not possible. That can include when suspensions happen, or when students are permanently dismissed from institutions, which many of you may have had to do already, and most of you will have to do at some time in your student affairs career. This is hopefully the last option that many student affairs individuals would have, as if a student fails a test, you don't automatically kick them out of the class or the course that they're taking. The same can be true for if there is a behavioral or a standards infraction that the student has performed that you as a student affairs professional has to deal with. The hope is that you can always help them learn, help them grow, help students to talk to one another and understand how their actions affected each other or affected the learning aspect of what the institution is doing inside and outside the classroom, but also to restore those students into community so that they continue to grow, they continue to learn, and they continue to become the individual they were called to do. Again, there are many different theories of conduct, and there have been many changes to conduct over the years. Public schools sometimes have a different standard of what their due process looks like, what they're allowed to do and aren't allowed to do in regards to outcomes of situations with students, etc., that private schools don't. That could especially be true in cases of free speech, in cases regarding um, sexuality and regarding the practice of sex outside of marriage, which many private, religiously affiliated institutions have in their student code of conduct as not being something that is allowed while individuals or students there. And many public schools do not have that. And so you can see the many differences in regards to conduct and how it is handled. And it's very important for you to know what is in your student handbook at your institution, what's the philosophy of conduct and discipline at your institution, and make sure that all of those are well laid out for the student to understand, hopefully with the end result being restoration of that student to the learning community and growth of that student as an individual. Also, very quickly, we're not going to go deeply into this, but Title IX is sometimes included in the role of someone who does conduct. Title IX typically has a different set of parameters to it and a different way that it happens. This changed tremendously over the last few years. The Trump administration very much changed how Title IX had happened from the previous Obama administration. What's important is to make sure that you are up to date on Title IX, federal Title IX guidelines, and that you understand how Title IX is done at your school, whether you are an individual who will hear Title IX cases or not. As student affairs individuals are typically the first line of individuals that students will talk to about possibly having been sexually harassed by a peer, or there having been a sexual assault, or other aspects of Title IX in which universities and colleges have to adjudicate cases. There are quite a few professional associations regarding residence life, commuter life, and conduct, probably more so residence life and conduct. But ACUHO-I is one I would absolutely suggest you consider joining, and that is the Association of College and University Housing Officers. They have those that are set regionally, say in the southeastern part of the nation. There's CIAHO, which is the southeastern portion of this organization, and also there's an international aspect to this organization. But they have an incredible amount of studies, best practices, and wonderful networking opportunities for higher education administrators and particularly student affairs administrators so that they can shape their craft in regards to residence life to a greater extent. NASPA and ACPA, of course, anything student affairs related, they're going to have a wealth of information. And in regards to student conduct in particular, there is the Association for Student Conduct Administrators. This is pretty much the gold standard for student conduct and administrators, and they give an incredible historical overview of student conduct and what it's looked like in universities and colleges, but also They are a wealth of information concerning new standards that are coming out, public and private differences in regards to how student conduct is being done, and best practices to help students learn through the student conduct process, and it not just be one of a punitive nature, but much more so one of education and one of restoration of students.